We have a very special guest from Ukraine, Anastasiya, and then of course we have Drew here. Maybe Anastasiya, you can briefly introduce yourself, who you are, what do you do, what is your favorite soup, and so on.
Hello. I'm Anastasiya. I'm a volunteer from Kharkiv. I also sometimes do like speaking for Ukrainians, like now, I guess. Mostly I just do fundraisers for the multiple battalions I work with, 43 Brigade, 113 Territorial Defense, etc. Trying to hang in here in Eastern Ukraine. I'm the infamous, I guess, Russian speaker from the East, you could say, that Russia is supposedly defending over here. But I guess that's it pretty much. My biggest appearance, I guess, was CNN and Piers Morgan. But other than that, just chilling with you guys.
You're
Very
probably
cool. Very cool.
the most famous person here, so it's really good to have you here.
No,
Yeah,
ain't no
absolutely.
way.
I
Absolutely.
think most people, especially on Twitter, remember you from that very heated discussion between you and Scott Horton, the guy who blames NATO for everything bad happening in the world. So, how can you explain what happened there, and how do you see the whole discussion now?
I was asked by like Piers Morgan manager, I believe, like on WhatsApp to join in there, and I was like, are you sure? Like they don't really have like many Ukrainians, and in particular they don't have like regular people, I think. And I was like, I'm just a regular ass person. I don't have like any like I'm not like a celebrity or anything. And they were like, yeah, we're cool with that. And now they have Zelensky and Usyk and me, I guess, the three Ukrainians. But anyway, point is that they say like we are very happy like to have like a Ukrainian on, and I'm like, oh, I shouldn't waste like an opportunity like that to speak, because they don't really have like Ukrainians or like Eastern Europeans at all, like in general. So people talk about Ukraine, about us a lot, but not with us about it ever, pretty much. So I was like, I'm jumping in on that, and then they said they're gonna be like Cenk Uygur, who from Young Turks, who's like also like was a candidate in the president or some shit. Like they have like some guy that killed
You know,
Obama or like Osama bin Laden or some shit. Like I don't know if that's even true. And then
you
they
know,
have this. Yeah.
Cenk
Uh
is
huh.
Cenk is Hassan Piker's uncle.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
yeah.
I
And like
know.
Hassan's pretty anti-Ukraine. It's funny. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, Cenk was surprisingly the least. Oh, Drew disappeared. Um. Um. Well, he appeared again. So Jake was basically the least antagonistic person there. So
yeah.
I don't know. But point is that there was this like dude who like supposedly killed Bin Laden, and there was like this Horton guy who I knew nothing about pretty much. And I was like, who's on my side? Because I thought four people, so two pro, two against, but no, it was just me against all three basically, up
Wow.
until General Clark appeared later on, who was pretty based and cool, and he schooled a bunch of people there in terms of like what actually happened with the Russian aggression and agreements, and about the NATO situation and all of that. But before he appeared, it was just basically me, and I was debating people who were like or talking about like Russian shit, like Burisma, American type of Russian propaganda, like
Yeah.
Burisma, like I don't know, Hunter Biden's dick, things like that, basically. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? Oh, sorry, can I even swear here?
Yeah, of
I
course, of
didn't
course. Yeah,
ask.
absolutely.
Yes. So I was like, what the hell? I was trying to figure out like who I'm supposed to be like in a duo with, I guess you could say. But then I was like, okay. And then Norton went off on his like epic rant about how it's all fault of the United States. Maidan was a coup. He was like Eminem, like spitting Russian propaganda talking points. And I was like, oh, that guy must be like on actual payroll, because he's like, he's actually doing it. Like he's not making like points like an actual person would, but just spitting out like talking point after talking point from Russia Today, just in English. And then I was like, well, I gotta listen to like everything he says and then try to, in my short period of time that will allow me to speak, to combat that, basically. And that's kind of what I tried to do as best as I could, which was not easy because he thrown so much there, like in a couple of minutes, like a actual professional. I gotta appreciate his craft, I guess. But yeah, mostly it was just, it's all NATO, bomb Donbass people, the regular stuff. Mostly just trying to say that we shouldn't support Ukraine because of the whole, it's pointless, and Russia is not at fault whatsoever. It's just Biden and all that, like
What was
America and all that.
what was the most outrageous thing he said, do you think, in that whole exchange?
I mean, I wouldn't say he was like super outrageous. I spoke with like absolute like degens on the internet by now.
Yeah,
Like
true.
people like yeah, so it's not like for example, there's like this guy called Lactoid who I debated. He's like a very small pro-Russia guy, and he's it was on Tim Pool though recently with so not so
Which
small
guy?
now,
Sorry?
maybe. I don't know. And
Who was
he
that?
was like it's like a conservative Trumpist guy who's like has very little, following, but he was asked on
Yeah.
Tim Pool, I guess, I guess as a fellow Russian propagandist, I
Yeah.
guess. So helping
Exactly.
your own, something like that. So they kind of like, he was a kind of guy who would say like that the kidnapping of Ukrainian children, for example, is Russia saving orphans.
Oh,
So I would
yeah.
that I did find offensive because it's a line of defense that I never heard. Like everyone, even like professional Russia propaganda people like Tucker Carlson, avoid that topic like a plague because you can't
Yeah,
really. But this guy was like
that's so true.
that bad. Yeah, but the
That's so
Horton
true.
was
They
just
like
a
to ignore that.
yeah, her Horton was just, like libertarian. We shouldn't get involved. American exceptionalism, but do it the other way around. Basically, everything is about America. Every single involvement in the world is America. America is at
Yeah.
fault about every decision that Russia, Iran, China, whatever the hell country makes. It's all about the evil West. So that's kind
Yes.
of like what his jam, I guess.
And he's been at it
Classic.
for a very long time. But yeah, can we talk more about Hunter Biden's dick? I mean, that would probably be very. Uh, but anyway,
I
I
did
think
see it though. I will say I was curious. I was like, "What's the fuss is all about?" And I googled it, and I'm like, "Oh, okay, I see it.
I mean, it's just a
What's the
dick.
fuss is all about?" I mean, it's a it's a dick, yeah. But I understand like
As is Scott
why they're
Horton.
talking about it.
Well,
Um,
isn't the Burisma thing? Wasn't Burisma like a Russian company? Like, I read that. I think it was like Joe Lindsay who was saying that like it was actually sort of like tied to like pro-Russia people in Ukraine. Burisma.
I mean, most business was. So it's not like
Yeah.
yeah. So it's not like really. I honestly only learned about all of that just from Magas. I had no
Yeah.
idea about any of that. So it wasn't like something that Ukrainians really. I mean, we have like obviously we have and still have corruption issues, like a post-Soviet legacy, if you will, like most countries that were combat that sort of thing. A lot of like oligarchs, a lot of like ownership of things, of big businesses. When I was like a kid, everything was owned by Russians, basically, right? And whether it's like factories, whether it's resources, whether it's either like straight up Russians or like dual citizens, for example, who have like both Ukrainian and Russian citizenship and have most of their business in Russia. So it's not like that sort of. It's not as big of a scandal in Eastern Europe as people made it out to be, but it's not really about us. It's never is. It's about Democrats or like Biden or like things like that. I at first I didn't really understand why the hell they would care about this so much, but then I realized that the conversation is always about kind of like America. So Ukraine is kind of like it's not really relevant to them that much. They talk about it through the lens of how we can besmirch Democrats or like Biden or like something like that, right? So it's like a basically like a bullet just to shoot your opposition with is what we are, I guess.
You're so right.
yeah.
Like they don't even think of Ukrainians as people. Like it's literally just an American culture war thing for them.
Yeah, like the stupid culture war shit they do all the time. It's
Exactly.
now us and trans people, I guess. We are like the main
Literally.
the main the main topics, it seems.
And they try combine that. They go Zelensky.
Yeah, now Tucker is doing that, right? Now
Yes.
Tucker is saying,
I
and
saw that.
Dugin, they both, Dugin and Tucker, they probably have a signal chat group. They are saying that Ukraine is moving into transgenderism or something. It's like they're trying to make it into something, and I feel like this is something. It's a really probably a powerful narrative among the MAGA people who are often very uneducated. Most of them, not all, but many of them are uneducated, and they don't really even understand kind of like what the hell is he saying. But it just feels like this powerful thing. Did you know that Ukraine is moving into transgenderism and it's against Christianity? So that's again, it's Ukraine is being used as this tool. Against the US Democrats or whatever. So, I mean, if we go back to 2019, Trump tried to get Zelensky to kind of give dirt on Joe Biden for the upcoming elections. And Zelensky declined. He didn't go with this. And that's the theory that's why Trump is so mad at Zelensky. And
was the first impeachment.
Yeah, and he withheld, I think, 400 million of aid and these Javelin anti-tank missiles, this delivery to Ukraine because of this, because he was so bitter at Zelensky not giving dirt on the Biden. So they came. I mean, the laptop thing, I think it was real, but the Burisma thing, it was not really, there was nothing there. It was just a business and but
well, I think it was a thing, but I think it was like bad what Hunter did. But yeah, my reading of it was that it was actually like the guys all involved in that were part of the pro-Russia side of Ukraine politics. That's why, like, that's where the big distortion comes from, I think.
They kind of like I'll be honest, like I don't give like two fucks about this Burisma thing, but they do because most of them are like, oh, Biden tried to basically buy off a judge, I guess, although that judge was like famously corrupt and half the country was already like on his ass. So yeah, it's just a very like a strange thing. But most importantly is that just like you guys like said about the whole Trump thing. By the way, it's funny that he's now bragging about the javelins all the time. Trump, I mean, he like saying this phrase like Obama gave him sheets or something, and I gave him javelins. He's like repeating this in like his retard mode like 100 times. But it's just that it was blackmail essentially, like give me dirt like on my political opponent, and then I will or else I will withhold aid that your country crucially needs. So that's considering what they're doing now, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. I mean, considering what administration is up to now, but back in the day, it was like a scandal, I guess you could say. And but transgender thing, I think it's just Dugin said we're the nation of transgenders, based, I guess. But point is that point is it's just that they kind of like just throw what sticks. So they would like look into what people discuss right now, right? What they where is the antagonism, for example, in the United States? For some reason, it's about two guys in sport, or two like transgender people in sports or something, and that's like a very big deal, and it's like a very contagious topic about that people argue about. So you combine things like that. You'd be like, oh, what like the MAGAs really like super hate right now? Like, I don't know, LGBT, trans people, I don't know, woke agenda, like, I don't know, things like that. Russians usually call that shit Western degeneracy or something like that, but it's not a term that really, sticks with Westerners, obviously. So they will go with this and they will go make Ukrainians that, basically. So if you talk with the lefty people, for example, with socialist communists in the West and people like that, you'd be like, oh, they're Nazis, right? So you would like throw something else. It's Timothy Snyder, I think, spoke about it the best. He's like, if you don't like gays, they're gay Ukrainians. If you don't like Nazis, they're Nazis. If you are a Nazi, then they're Jews. So with the Jewish president. So it's just it's very like convenient, I guess, and whatever sticks they just throw.
Literally. Oh, it's just so bizarre. That was such a good quote by Snyder. Such a good quote by Snyder. It's funny. Like Anastasia, I was in Ukraine like a month and a half ago, and it's not a very it's like most people are like pretty. I mean, like it's a conservative country overall. It seems like I don't know with this whole thing that it's like Christianity's banned. Like, I mean, I saw churches everywhere. Like, I don't know. Like, they literally have constructed this kind of parallel reality of Ukraine.
Yeah, that's the concern. The church meme just annoys like the fuck out of me. I posted on Twitter about it recently because I'm just like Carson was saying this again, like
Yeah,
they're fighting against Christianity. I guess that's again what sticks. So if your audience like LARPs as like traditional Christians,
yeah,
then you say that Ukrainians are as Satan basically. But it's just so bizarre as if you live here, right? Because
yeah.
we have Easter now. I just literally returned like I got like a bunch of Easter cakes, paski they're called. It's like a traditional I know I think it's paska is another word in Finnish. Someone told me. I don't know if you
Let
know
me
what I
shit.
mean. Yes. But it's our traditional cakes, okay? It's not our fault
We
that
eat
it's your
Pascha
word version.
here also in Easter. So
Oh, I see. Okay, that's awkward. So, point is that coprophilia all over the place. But point is that it's just that I was like at the volunteer center who make those for children in the hospital, the cancer hospital in Kharkiv. They also make them for refugees, for soldiers, for all sorts of people, and they like baked a huge amount of them, and we like gave them to people, and it was like all cute. And we have like this priest who is like throwing like holy water and everything, and and reading like prayers and things like that. I'm not religious myself, I really don't care, but people do care, and like everyone was gathering there and things like that. And then you go on the internet, and they're like, Ukraine, Zelensky prohibited
It's
Christianity. And you're
crazy.
like, what is this
Mental.
clown world? Yeah, it's so strange. But I
I
guess it's
saw I
because
saw
we
churches open
of the
everywhere.
Moscovian Orthodoxy is apparently the Christianity. It
Yeah, that's
always like
the
makes
one.
me laugh. So it's so yes, if you refuse to abide by like Moscovian Orthodoxy, it's then you're like that's it. Moscovian Patriarchat cancelled, Christianity cancelled altogether. So it's just never mind the fact that we have our own church,
Of
Ukrainian,
course, yeah.
Orthodox Christian church. Yeah, it's just yeah,
You
Greek
know, yeah.
Catholic, all sorts of people. Yeah, it's just pretty wonky.
You know,
But
I'm Greek Orthodox, and they sided with the Ukrainian church in Ukraine, and they actually aren't in communion with the Russian church anymore. Like, they literally split. Even the Greek Orthodox, like Russia is like not the leader of the Orthodox world. Like, half the Orthodox world split over
yeah,
Ukraine, basically. Yeah.
yeah. And it's just and the reason why that was prohibited was pretty solid in like martial law and wartime. You have this win of the Kremlin essentially, which everyone with two brain cells to rub together knows that Russia uses their church as a instrument
Mm.
in like political sense. And they were like investigated, and they were doing a lot of like assistant of Russian military and things like that. Not only just propaganda and talking with people, but also just straight up assisting Russian army. So obviously you cannot allow that sort of thing to be functional in times of war. We have like a lot of problems with obviously people like learning things they shouldn't learn. There are people you can like buy, basically some marginalized people like alcoholics, people like that. You can like just pay money and they will give
Yeah.
like positions of things. It's unfortunately does happen, like not in a like large scale, but it can do enough damage. And you sure as hell shouldn't have like organizations that work against you in a time like this when people's
Yeah.
life depend on that OPSEC situation basically. So
Yeah.
yeah, but
No country would allow it.
yeah, people like Tucker Carlson obviously like they twist this in the sense that they are prohibiting like church altogether, which I mean, like I said, it's just pretty pretty wild. Transgender stain is also pretty strange because I'm not like gonna like throw us under a bus, but most people like don't know what the fuck that is. Like in big
Yeah.
cities probably, yeah, but in you will talk to like some random, I don't know, guy in like a small village that is being shelled or something, and you like try to explain to him like a transgender thing, and he's like, and he would be like dudes dressed in dudes in dresses or something. Like yeah, he really wouldn't literally know. And it's just to paint us as this like LGBT super. I wish honestly, I'm like I'm pretty pretty progressive. I would like like gay rights obviously to be better in Ukraine, and marriage to be allowed. We don't even have that. Like what transgender haven? Like it's just yeah, it's just pretty nonsense.
If you
So
went Yeah, exactly. If you went to like Kherson or whatever, and like you were trying to talk to like an old babushka in the street, like about these issues, like they just would be like they're dealing with being shelled. They're literally dealing with being shelled. It's just
Yeah,
oh,
it would be a bit cringe to talk with babushka about that, I will say. Yeah. Uh, I would avoid that if I
I
could.
think what is really really unfair about the whole discussion, especially with the pro-Kremlin people talking about Ukraine from the States, for example, is that they do not really. They don't care that the country is at war. There's a martial law at place, and you are being invaded. Like 1/5 of the country has been temporarily occupied. It's temporarily occupied by the Russians. Yet they speak like Ukraine should act like normal country that is not at war. So basically, it's like, okay, constitution says that there shouldn't be elections when there's martial law, or I think it was a law, maybe. Maybe you can
Yeah,
correct me on
yeah,
that.
yeah, in Constitution, yeah.
And also about media, if Russia would be invading Finland and there would be these TV channels that were promoting pro-Kremlin propaganda 24/7, of course they would be closed. If
yeah.
Russia invaded the United States and there would be this channel that would do the same, they would be immediately closed because it's a
Every
martial law.
country,
Yes, and
every
if
country would do.
there is a religious sect that is infiltrated by FSB agents, of course it would be closed. That's like, but then these people, these dishonest people like Tucker Carlson, they try to make it show that countries shouldn't change when they are being invaded. Martial law is martial law, and this takes me to the next point. Today, the Reporters Without Borders published their World Press Freedom Index rating for, I think, well, for the last year. And some interesting things here. United States is at number 57, and Ukraine is at number 62. And we have to
Wow.
remember there is a
It's not
martial
that
law in
far.
Ukraine. Ukraine is at
What
war,
the
and
hell?
still they're very close. Russia is
Wow.
171, China 178. Poland is up by 16 points at the 31st. I mean,
Wow.
and Estonia is second. Estonia is now number 2, which is I think
Wow.
Yes,
that's an
base
incredible
Estonia.
feat.
I
Yeah.
always, I always try to hype Estonia because most people don't talk about it because obviously they're quite small, but they're just so much of their GDP was like allocated to us. Like I think the number one is them in terms of like GDP percentage, and I was like always like hype up Estonia, and nobody's like talking about that. Yeah, and also
Amazing.
amazing like fits in terms of like anti-corruption stuff, freedom of press things, and all of that. Like just deserves all the hype. And everyone from like Estonia was like super amazing, who I like spoke with in terms of like supporting Ukraine and all of that. It's just yeah. I am a fan of pretty much everyone in the politics, and I was a huge simp for Finland. Which I mean, it's a bit awkward to say
Oh,
with
who?
you here,
Sorry.
but Finland. I just love Finland.
Oh,
I just so inspired like by the Winter War and that story and that history of it.
mm.
I was like, yeah, I was just always like, as a kid, I was like, oh my god, that is like the best thing ever. And about the fight with the Soviet Union and all of that, and prevailing as a country, and in the face of such a huge enormous like force and all of that. I just know I always found it inspiring. I find it more inspiring now obviously than ever, because that feels like something we're doing now in a sense. And yeah, but that aside, that aside, I will say like, yeah, I am very frustrated by that, but the fact that we're held like up with some sort of standard that nobody else is held to. And with no like consideration for invasion, for war, for anything. I had this conversation about the elections multiple times with people on the debates and things like that. And then you bring up like things that constitution like straight up prohibits in Ukraine, that elections during martial law. So you either have to suspend martial law, which is suicidal during
Yeah.
an invasion, and or you have to, for example, do change the constitution itself, which is also like a huge hassle. And it would be probably something you could do, but most people in Ukraine really understand that elections now are not like really something we even need, because how would you, and I am asking like objective practical questions, like how would you conduct, for example, an
Oh,
election with 10 million people displaced, right? So you have displacement inside the country and also refugees who left the country, like women, children, things like that, right?
mm.
And overall, the number of the people who currently don't live, and we vote the way we vote. You vote where you're registered, so where you where you live. So it's very difficult to organize if people moved, for example, to another part of the country or outside of the country altogether, right? You have that. You have million people in the army essentially, who should obviously be able to vote more than anyone else, in my opinion, but they cannot take a break, from the
Yeah,
front line to go vote. It's not possible. For example, that, and also there's like other practical issues with bombings. So
every
how do
day.
you organize it? How can you organize it? For example, in Kharkiv and Kiev, you potentially could maybe do it underground, the metro station or something like that. But in most cities, we don't have it. And how would you organize it? First of all, for example, you have to announce, right, the location where the election is happening, because
Yeah,
people need to know where it's happening. But how can you do that and then not get bombed in that location? I must ask. And
Russia would massacre people. Russia
yeah.
would hit the target. 100% Russia would hit the election, the booths. Like that's what Russia would do. We all know it.
Yeah, and
And they would
and
then
also
they would
okay,
call it a NATO base or something.
yes, also occupied people, for example, 20% of the territory is occupied, right? And there are people there also who won't be able to vote. So what kind of voting it would be even? How can you call that like democratic voting if like more than half the people can't really participate? It's just, yes,
Yeah,
it's absolutely stupid. And the arguments I was given was like, we Americans had a vote during Civil War, and you like sitting there like, my guy, like horses and like muskets and shit like that, no, like Iskander's missiles.
I know.
You were not invaded. It was like, it was a very long time ago. It's a completely different war right now, and
No
we didn't
ballistic
have like,
missiles.
yeah, no ballistic missiles. We had it was horses time, dude. It's like it's just, yeah, it's a very, it's mind-boggling like to compare and then be like, oh, other people had. Oh, I don't know if you guys saw the conversation with Piers Morgan and Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson is like, we had elections during the war, and you had elections during the war. By you, he meant Piers Morgan, I imagine, which
Oh,
is very
British. The
strange
British.
because,
That's not
yeah,
even
because they
true.
didn't.
Yeah, they
They
literally
didn't.
didn't even do it.
Yeah, they actually postponed elections for a very long time, even after war
Yeah.
ended.
And the
So
US
yeah, it's
wasn't
just
invaded. The United States was never invaded
Yeah, it was
after
a
UK.
the
civil
war.
war.
UK was bombed, yes, but it wasn't, for
There
example,
was no threat against the US.
yeah. Same with UK, like they were bombed obviously heavily, like but they weren't occupied, and they didn't have like 10 million refugees, and they didn't have like all that we're currently dealing with, the ground invasion, of their, it's just, yeah, it's just pretty fucking bizarre, like the occupation doesn't even come into consideration for these people, it seems, because for me it's quite, substantial reason, never mind the fact that, like I said, we don't have like the right to do it with our constitution, which should matter. Okay. I mean, you might not like our constitution, I guess, you might not like that law, but it's there, it's just yeah, it's just pretty difficult to be held to the standard that nobody, it's not real standard though, it's just,
Yeah.
it's just something they use to like basically attack us and to paint Zelensky, for example, as a dictator, and to like Trump said, he has like 4% approval or something like that, he said back in the day. And it's just, yeah, jealous much because
Yeah.
if anything, Zelensky is much more popular than he is amongst people. No, but that aside, it's just yeah, it's very deliberate to paint it like, for example, libertarian guys like Horton likes to do it, or like Dave Smith. I hate that guy. He does that all the time. There are not no good guys here. We're not supporting some like liberal democracy in Ukraine. It's like, but Tucker Carlson does that as well. Basically, he's like, so they have Putin. He's like, maybe a dictator. He wouldn't like say he's a dictator. And we have like Zelensky, who's definitely, surely
Oh,
a
what a joke.
dictator. Yeah. So who like cares like what's happening there? It's not like we're not. It's trying to basically undermine the American people the idea that they are supporting Ukraine because Ukraine is better essentially, and Ukraine is like
Yeah.
closer to values to the West, and Ukraine is a democracy. And yeah, I am frustrated with that because there's so much of that, and now it's even more of that because before it was like independent media people, quote unquote, independent like Tim Pool. So people like that, alternative media people. But now it's just actual like administration, actual like officials in the government in the United States are doing that, and that's a little bit more scary in terms of like who holds the power here.
Yeah, I have said that the Trump administration is just fully infiltrated by pro-Kremlin people, from top to basically to bottom. If you look at what's happening right now, is that okay? Trump, many can claim that he's pro-Kremlin, but I mean Tulsi Gabbard definitely is.
Yeah.
J.D. Vance definitely is. Robert Kennedy Jr. definitely is. I mean, a lot of these. Matt Gaetz was supposed to be there. As Witkov definitely is pro-Russian,
Yeah.
pro-Putin. I mean, and now the White House press conferences are just. It's like watching one in North Korea where everybody's just praising Trump and asking these really easy questions. And now you have Dom Lucre. Do you know this guy? He's a guy who spread several conspiracy theories, just made up shit. He's even posted like child pornography on X, and Elon Musk brought him back. And
He
Tim Pool
posted
is
it
there.
and
Fuck.
Tim Pool
he posted it
was
and
paid by the Kremlin. Okay, yeah. Go on, Drew. Sorry.
oh, sorry, I was just saying with Dom Lucre, what he did, he was trying to prove something. He was trying to, like, he positions himself as like a pedophile hunter or whatever. And he thought that the best way to do that was to actually post like legitimate child exploitation material. And apparently he put his watermark on it and posted it directly to his Twitter. And he was like, he posted saying like, oh, this is what we're trying to fight or something insane like that. And he got banned. And then when Elon bought Twitter, he brought him back. And this is the guy invited into the White House. That's insane. Like, there's no standards at all. No standards at all.
Yeah, exactly. There's a point I want to make is, again, I think a lot of these discussions are just trying to force us to discuss Ukraine and not Russia. Because when you start talking about Russia, you just cannot defend them. Like today, I think there was a story that Russia is recruiting children to like suicide bombings. So they give them backs. They say that they're full of money or whatever, and then they take them to the spot. And when they reach the spot, they just detonate these bombs, and the children die. So this is something like, how can you defend this? How can you defend a country that bombs cancer hospital for children or civilian target residential areas? And this is just because that's why they don't talk about Russia, really. They maybe they make some fancy propaganda about metro stations or French supermarkets in Moscow, but they never talk about the atrocities, the war crimes. And this is exactly where they want to be. They want to frame the whole discussion revolving around Ukraine and kind of put Russia aside, because when you start looking at it more closely, you cannot defend them.
They know they can't even try. That's it. So they just have to try to attack Ukraine.
That's one of the reasons why I was so surprised with Tim Pool. He's like a friend of mine, Week TV. He's a YouTuber. He's doing like hosts like debates and things like that. And he was invited to debate that lactoid dude I mentioned on Tim Pool. And I was he kind of asked me to help him out a little bit. My friend, like, he was like, I'm not like explain some stuff to him about the East and all of that, because all the talking points are stale. They're very old. So we have like legitimacy of the Yanukovych. You have like bomb Donbass. You have like shit like nobody talks about. By the way, in Russia as well, like people don't even like use that rhetoric in Russia by now. Like I
It's so
haven't
old.
heard like denazification in like a good while, like since I don't know 23 maybe. So those like just NATO, they don't really talk about that. They're
Don't,
much
yeah.
more forward now with their like yeah, Ukraine shouldn't exist, you know. Like lately they were like Russia stops where we decide, you know, if you don't like it, you know, we kill you, things like that. Like very open, very like broadly about their like expansionist imperialist
Putin on
ambitions.
Tucker. Putin
Mhm.
on Tucker. He didn't talk about NATO at all. He was like, he just wanted to go back 1,000 years into the history of it
Oh
all.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, Ruri.
Yeah.
Yeah, that meme. I forgot about that already.
Yeah.
It was like it
That
was
was
one
such a
of
good
my favorite
example.
things. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that was
didn't
such a good
actually.
example.
I was mad when initially that Tucker, you know, obviously is doing this like propaganda with Putin, but then I was
Hey,
like, oh no, it's not actually not that bad because it shows how actually different those like worlds are. Because Tucker is
I
like,
know.
talk about transgenders, talk about I don't know something that
NATO,
bloggers
yeah.
care about, NATO like expansion, and Putin's like, no, 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 Rurik in 90 like 76 or something, like, you know, she was just like so there, like in that like mindset of like, you know, what is great Russia, what is, you know, Russian people and all of that, like you know, the what Russians actually care about that, obviously, so that's why. And they don't see us like as something that should be allowed to exist if we are separate from them, right? And yeah, and they just Ukrainian identity in itself is already like a challenge for them. They already don't. It's a historical like thing that happened like way before, obviously, right? The road to prohibition of Ukrainian
Yeah.
language in the it's a centuries old thing. And but yeah, it's just, yeah, just kind of funny to see that like contrast, because American pro-Russian propaganda is so focused on things that you know, Americans do care about,
Yeah.
so NATO,
Exactly.
all of that, like, you know. And you can sell that narrative basically to both like lefty people and right wingers and everyone, because it took me a while to understand like how obsessed Americans are with the America, even if
Yeah.
they pretend that they hate like their own country, and they're like, oh, you know, we are the worst empire of evil, like lefty people like to do that, right? And then they're like still just as obsessed with it like as anyone else. It's like,
Yeah.
so a friend of mine explained this actually back in the day. He was like, he's a streamer, you Destiny. He was like, oh, yeah, it's like exceptionalism, but one party is like American is exceptionally better than everyone else, and the other party is like exceptionally worse than everyone else, but still
Yes.
exceptional.
So true.
So, so the obsession with like exceptionality is still there, and everything revolves around it. So there's no world outside of them, really. I recently watched a video that YouTuber Shu on Head made. She's like used to be like anti-feminist slope person, and now did the
Yeah.
video about how good it is as a leftist, by the way, how good it is that USA no longer exists because they sponsored Russian anti-Putin, like, you know, anti-Kremlin independent media in Russia, and they were like trying to she was like basically saying it was CIA like coup to undermine, you
Yeah.
know, people to foster resistance in various countries against like regimes and things like that. And you listen to that and you think like, oh my god, you're like so privileged and obsessed, and you're also so disrespectful to people in like third world countries, quote unquote, because she cannot even fathom the idea that discontent with authoritarian regimes, oppressive regimes, can be genuine. That we
Yes.
here people can actually be like, you know what, we don't actually like that shit, we don't want to live like under Yanukovych, we don't want to live in like with dictator laws that prohibit people gathering more than 5 people and throw people in jail for protests, right? Maybe we actually have some authentic discontent with that. But no, I hate those people genuinely. They're like, you know, those Eastern Ukrainian, oh, those Eastern Europeans, they built different, you know. They would love the gulag if only not for American propaganda telling them not to love a gulag. It's so offensive,
It's
honestly,
racist.
like it's just,
It's
yeah,
actually
no, I mean,
racist. It literally is
it's not
racist.
it's not a term I genuinely like use that much, but maybe
Yeah.
you can say so, yes, because it's just
Yeah.
I listen to the girl, and I see that she cannot even like comprehend, fathom the idea that we can maybe want the same things that they have, right? We maybe want like human rights, we want freedom of speech, we want things like that, right? We want some things that the people in the West have, and maybe we are actually genuinely, authentically are fighting to have that. But no, it's just never even like not even a thought in their mind that we could possibly be that evolved. Yeah, like I
Absolutely.
said, we would love a gulag,
My
if
theory,
only not
my,
for the American propaganda.
my theory is that I just learned. I'm not very good at English. I learned this new word, sycophant. Is it sycophant?
Yeah,
Or,
a great
sycophant.
term. Great term.
So these people, they try to gain advantage of the new situation. So Trump won. So what's the kind of natural route from here is to kind of follow that route. You go there, you become more radical, you become more conservative, you become more religious, and just start criticizing everything that Trump or his kind of cronies are criticizing, and maybe you get invitations to cool podcasts like Joe Rogan or whatever. They're like opportunistic in their like efforts. They might not even support these things, but they want money. They want to make more money. They want to stay in the limelight, in the spotlight, and they want to be popular. So what's the kind of rational, well, not rational, but what's the natural course of action is to go that way. So you start promoting these ideas, and if most people from the Trump administration are shitting on Ukraine, then you go with that. I think a lot of people like Theo Von, for example, very popular podcaster, considered to be in the left political spectrum, but he's also went there like talking shit about Ukraine, talking shit about Zelensky, because that's where the tide is going. That's where the tide is moving. And I mean, it's
what's a funny one?
There's no value or moral system at place there.
You know what's a funny example of this, Pekka? And it's actually not from a left winger, but it's actually from a far right guy. Do you know that guy, Captive Dreamer, that JD Vance follows?
You love to talk about that. We should invite that guy here. You can debate. But yeah, I know the guy.
I don't know
I'll tell you a very brief overview, Anastasia. Like, he's basically like a white nationalist. Like, he's like a far right guy, and like JD Vance follows him. And this guy's like previously posted about how he loves Hitler and all this stuff. Like, he was the guy who, and he's not just like a complete random. Because do you remember back during the election when they had the whole the Haitians are eating cats shit from Ohio? Yes. Yeah, he was literally. I'm not even kidding. He was the guy who invented that. He was the guy who invented that. I'm not even kidding. That's why JD Vance started following him. And this guy, like, if you looked at his post like a year and a half ago or a year ago, he was kind of pro-Ukraine, because you know how there's like that trend. It's like there are some far right guys who love Ukraine because they see it as like Ukraine is the white people fighting against like the Asian hordes of Russia. Like, that's their whole narrative, right? Which is retarded. Like, the whole thing, everything's retarded. But this is a funny thing though. Like, yeah, if you looked like 2 years ago, this guy who was far right was really pro-Ukraine or whatever, and he was like, oh yeah, Azov's based and all this stuff. And then like when Trump came in and started saying Ukraine's bad, suddenly he starts going like, we hate Ukrainians, deport Ukrainians, all this stuff. Like, and it was just funny because like, yeah, we see the opportunistic guys on the far left who tailor their views to it. But then here was like a guy on the far right who suddenly, he decided that, oh, Russia's actually the great hope of far right. Like, he decided that overnight, It's just funny. You see this on both the far left and the far right. It's amazing.
Yeah. It's back to this, like, we are very flexible, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
We are very flexible. I sometimes get like at the same day emails like, for example, someone would say that I'm like, there's this new trend from the very like far right people to call us like beggars and gypsies now. And I'm like,
to Ukrainians.
Yeah, that's like a very old meme. Colon Eastern European. It's not something like I heard in a very. It's a very old, like old trope, old Nazi shit. It's like very old, and it like appeared from the far right people, and but leftists at the same time will write like, you aren't, you are like white, blue-eyed. That's that's why you cannot be like. Yeah, and they're like, what? Like, both at the same time. Same like leftists be like, oh, you're like Banderite Nazi whore or something like that. I hope like Russians denazify you to death or something like that. Yeah, and then you will get a message like, you are actually like a woke LGBT
Jewish
transgender nation, and you're like, oh, wait a second. Yeah, for example, like Zelensky is always he's like a Nazi Ukrainian like Banderite if you're speaking with a communist guy in the West, and if you speak with a the far right person, they would be like he's a Jewish like
Oh,
something. The lefties now also say like Zionist and things like that because
yeah, yeah,
it's a trend right
that's a
now.
new one. Yeah,
Yeah,
they
and you're
started
like,
calling him Zionist, and
yeah,
Ukraine gave massive amounts of aid shipment to Palestine. Like
yeah,
it's
food,
amazing.
yeah, mostly.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
and
also
also yeah,
accepted their like statehood, and we also like voted for them multiple times.
at the
I
UN.
think ever
Yeah,
since like
literally.
90s or some shit, like people Ukraine, and like okay, you know, and you get like completely like different messaging from like thrown at you as like as a Ukrainian online from like both camps essentially, like only normal people in the middle somewhere like liberals things like that I behave normal, the rest just are absolutely unhinged towards me. And I have been getting that kind of thing from mostly like leftists in 22, 23, because right wingers just didn't care that much.
Yeah,
About like, Ukraine, just didn't really speak that much about it. Now they do care because
yeah.
Trump and MAGA and everyone is talking about it. It became like their cultural like kind of thing to speak about this like situation. Oh, I also got like amazing emails from leftists explaining to me why I'm not white.
Oh,
Because whiteness is a social construct, and Ukrainians are not accepted as white. And they were like, "Why? How can you be like a white nationalist if you're not white?" And I'm like, "Dude,
so
I
many
am
times.
white, but I'm not a white nationalist. Like, you got it
So
all
deranged.
wrong." Yeah, it was just a lot of things I learned. Honestly, I never spoke much with Westerners at all, like until 22.
Yeah,
So I didn't really. I've been in like many. I've been in like Asian countries. I've been in the European countries, but mostly like closer to Poland, like Czech Republic, Germany, things like that. I didn't really um didn't have that much like contact with like Americans and things like that. And I was like, oh my god, things are going on over there. It's like,
bizarre.
there's so much to learn. It's a different reality altogether. It seems like, yeah,
Yeah,
very very
I've
very
seen
strange.
I've seen like really, really hardcore pro-Israel people say like, "Oh no, we hate Ukraine because they vote with Palestine at the UN and they're against us and like oh they're like and they did the Holocaust in World War II and stuff like that." And then I now see,
Oh,
but then I
sorry.
now see the
The
lefties say that
Holocaust.
Zelensky's a Zionist and loves Israel and stuff like that. It's just it
Yeah.
literally just changes. This should be. I can't believe that this is not enough for people to see through the propaganda. Like if you were just looking at this as an objective person, you'd have to see the cognitive dissonance. You'd be like, it can't be both at the same time. It can't be both Zionist and hates Jews. It can't be both, Nazi and Jewish. Like you'd look at this and you'd be like, somebody's got to be lying about all this propaganda. But I don't understand that people can't see it through it. It's just incredible.
It's just quite difficult. Pekka would know better. He's a master about like propaganda and things like that. And but it's just, it doesn't have to be cohesive really. Like
Yeah,
the least cohesive it is, actually the better. That's kind of
yeah,
how Russian propaganda works. So you can have like multiple conflicting narratives at the same time, foster hate essentially towards us, and undermine people's support and aid, and all of that is the goal at the end of the day. Like how you
yeah,
get there, it doesn't really matter that much. The concept of truth kind of needs to be like destroyed altogether. That's kind of
yeah,
when you speak with I have most of my relatives unfortunately live in Russia. I don't really have like any much connection with them anymore for
well,
reasons of,
yeah.
should not, I mean, there are like Russians, what can I say about that? They're Greek technically, but they
Wow.
are Russians, and yeah. So at the same time, it's just quite difficult sometimes we would hear what people would say. For example, I remember that in Crimea, when only Maidan just happened and the annexation of Crimea happened and all of that, right? And you would ask people like relatives, friends in Russia, right? You would say like what the hell, like
Yeah,
you're like your soldiers like annexed our shit, and they'd be like, no, Putin said there's no like Russian soldiers there. And you'd be like, well, there are there. And then after a month, right, he announces that actually they were there like all this
yeah,
time, and they did do it. And I wasn't quite young at the time. I was like 19, 20, and I like called them and I was be like, so he was lying. You now know that I was telling you the truth and he was lying. And I was shocked like at the time what they answered. They answered with, well, we know he's lied, but it's for the greater good, like of Russia, because Crimea is Russia. So not only they were in on the lie, they supported the lie. They didn't care that he lied actually, because the end sort of justifies the means. So they supported like the end aim, and they were in on the lie. So ever since then, I really realized how that works at the end of the day. Yeah, so
That's a
that's why most people are not as dumb as they seem. Actually, they are
yeah.
they're exactly what they're doing, and it's just like the people I just mentioned, right? They pretended not to know because it was convenient, and then they didn't care. They accepted that the lie was that's how you forward like your guy, essentially. Like with Trump, kind of the same, right? Many people are
So true.
sure deluded and dumb, but many know exactly what they're doing. They forward in the lie and they're in on the lie, essentially.
That's
So
so
Yeah,
true.
there's so many examples of this. Putin saying that the Ukrainians have killed 15,000 civilians in Donbas.
oh
Was it
yeah,
like
that's fake news.
Angels of Donbas? This kind of
Mhm.
campaigning. They even made documentaries about it. That was a lie, of course. UN report told the truth about that. Putin said Russia is not invading Ukraine like a few days before it happened, or 1 month maybe.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And now with the North Korean soldiers, all the pro-Kremlin people are saying there's no proof of North Korean soldiers, and then they show videos where they practice
Yep.
together. So I mean,
It takes
it's
like one or
just
2 months.
yeah. But I want to go back
Yeah,
to this
usually,
kind of
yeah.
like we again we kind of shifted the discussion over to Zelensky and like all these theories about Zelensky being Zionist or whatever, all these lies. But then again, we are not really talking that much about Putin. We are not really talking about, okay, how is Putin? Is Putin nobody's calling Putin a Zionist. Nobody's calling him,
Yeah, it's
I don't know. So there's no, I know that a lot of the probably comes from the KGB background. So there's not that, he's like Teflon. You cannot really grab the guy. There's not much to kind of go with. There's not that much information. But especially at the beginning of the war, there was a lot of propaganda, a lot of also disinformation, but also like theories on like Putin shitting himself and all this stuff. But nowadays, we don't really talk about Putin anymore. We just kind of go with it, and everything is about Zelensky. So they've been
yeah.
really good at this framing, but we don't really talk about Putin anymore. It's just, it's all the framing is in Ukraine right now. So do you think that it would benefit Ukraine if there would be the shift of talking about the Kremlin and its cronies, Putin's cronies again, or does it even matter?
Honestly, like I do agree like with you that that's happening, and that's I think part of the reasoning why there's so much talk about Zelensky and Ukraine is not to speak about obvious atrocities and 100,000 registered war crimes and ICC warrant and all of that. The best example would be actually be the conscription talk, in my opinion, because people love to talk about conscription in Ukraine, like how awful and evil it is that people are Zelensky's throwing people, in the meat grinder, and you're like, what about fucking Russia though? What about them throwing people in the meat grinder?
I
Really,
know.
we're defending ourselves. What are they doing that for? Like, what are they conscripting people for? Right? What are they throwing like 500,000 people for? Like, it's I had this conversation about conscription, and the guy was like, on Temple, the one Lactoid was like, oh, you like, Ukrainians, evil Ukrainians conscripting poor like main men, throwing them like as if war, rules doesn't exist, as if nobody else in the world conscripted during invasion, all of that. But then he's like, and then the other debater was like, well, Russia is like conscripting literally people from occupied areas, which is by the Geneva Convention is a war crime. You should not be in occupied areas. They're taking people and then throwing them against their own people in Ukraine. So
Yeah.
and he was like, he didn't acknowledge the difference that one is a war crime by like Roman Statute, Geneva Convention, right, and the other one is pretty like legal thing. Horrible, obviously. Nobody wants to go to the front if they can decide, not to be invaded. Everyone would decide not to fight. Most of my friends at the front are volunteers, so they volunteered to go there. So they yesterday, so like years ago or a couple of years ago, they have been civilians just like everyone else, right? And obviously I don't want them there, but it's not our choice. but in Russia, most people even go for money. So I understand like why, because their life is like super shit in terms of like that's the for some people in Russia it's even the only way to earn money altogether, especially since they like love to take people from very poor regions of Russia, like eastern parts of Russia, for example, not like Moscow residents, okay, but
But yeah,
like people of yeah, Buryatia and people like that, right? So all of that is like nobody talks about that. Instead, we're talking about evil conscription in Ukraine. And it's I don't know how could we redirect the conversation though to answer your question. Like it's just like like a flow of this like constant smearing campaign of Ukraine that Russia has been doing for since 2014 actively, and now it's kind of like amplified with a megaphone of United States now. And I'm not sure exactly like how can we bring it to. We do try, like for example, even Zelensky tries to bring that up to like people like Lex Friedman, like I don't know, like Ben
oh,
Shapiro or whatever, like Piers Morgan, who he spoke with right recently, to bring up the intention towards the crimes and atrocities and the actual like situation and the realities on the ground. But it kind of falls on like deaf ears, it seems to me, because most people really just bought into those narratives that have been repeated 100 times now. And as much time as sometimes people like in Ukraine ask me like, why Trump is like, why he's so like retarded, why he's repeating the same thing 100 times, like. And I'm like, yeah, he does come across as a little bit retarded, but at the same time it does work. If you like repeat the
it
exact
does.
same thing like 100,000 times, it does stick to people's brains.
I
And
know,
yeah,
which is
so it's, I
concerning,
don't know.
which is
Yeah.
worrying
I
that people.
I have a theory. I think they are kind of relying on this fatigue, war fatigue, or any kind of fatigue in media. Like with COVID, everybody at the beginning of COVID, everybody was. I was every day, like I was at work, and I was looking at these numbers of people being hospitalized and people dying and like really locked in on the whole pandemic. But then I think I felt I I became numb to all this information, and it's a kind of it's a sad theory, but I think the war fatigue has really struck in, and people are numb to all this evil that's going on, and they just kind of like it's business as usual, bombing hospitals with children, and it's business as usual. We it's people think that, okay, I read about this last month in the news, and it's just same old, same old. So my theory is that they just rely on this war fatigue and people becoming numb to all the evil that is happening. So even if you say 100,000 war crimes, that's a massive number, but people just don't
Yeah.
have the energy to care anymore because they kind of want to move on. People are kind of like this. So maybe 2-3 years we can focus on something, and then we want to move on to other things because these things, because they are extremely negative, and we try to find something positive in our lives, and we just kind of push it aside and try to forget it altogether. So they are, in my view, they are relying on this kind of strategy that people stop caring at some point.
I would
It's
say like
sad.
three things. One is like definitely that fatigue, because people can only care about sort of like a disastrous issue for so long, essentially, before moving on to something else. Also, Israel Palestine kind of like shifted the focus quite a lot from Ukraine. It's now kind of sort of back a little bit on Ukraine because of the whole ceasefire negotiation, Trump, Oval Office, clown circus show, and all of that. But not in a good way. I think that it's not attention is not on actually like war. It's more on this whole like politic and Trump on Twitter situation, right? But Israel Palestine shifted focus from us quite a lot.
Mm.
Obviously, the fatigue did happen, and it does happen. It's pretty normal, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I don't know. Like I understand that people live their lives. I don't demand people to constantly like see what is going on like in Ukraine. I understand that. But it also is like, of course, the bad reporting, unfortunately, because quite a lot of like, for example, big media, New York Times, and people like that,
Yeah.
they do report quite poorly. Like most people don't even
Yes.
know. Like sometimes genuinely, like I speak with people and I'm named things that happen, and they're like,
Yeah.
I never heard about that. Most people don't know about the children thing, for example, because it's
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
severely underreported. And UN said it's like a war crime, our claim to genocide, essentially, like potential, right? Claim that we can make about that. Human Rights Council, European Council of Human Rights, blah blah blah. A lot of like people, like big organizations, right? ICC gave a warrant on like Putin, and Lvova Belova, the woman, is like responsible for this whole operation of the children abduction. And it's supposed to be a big deal. It's supposed to be, but it's really like isn't. And I think it's an issue, very much also an issue of reporting, and
Yes.
big journals. I worked with some people like from The Economist, from like BBC, ITV News, showing them stuff around like Ukraine, and being like getting them to like the front and everything. For example, I remember I tried extremely hard to get people to care about like Izium massacre, and
Yeah.
which is in Kharkiv region, and quite close, like 2 hours away from where I live, essentially. So I really wanted them to go there, and it was very difficult to get people to actually like care and be interested in going there. I brought like small YouTube journalists, freelance people there at when exhumation process was happening, like taking down bodies out of the like mass graves, and it's the biggest mass grave since like Yugoslavia, essentially. And just yeah, and we were like cool people with like cut off genitals, and absolute like uh, probably one of the worst scenes I have ever seen, without an exaggeration. And you really very little reporting. Same with like, for example, Kherson,
Yeah.
and human safari there. Like there are like, I don't know, like hours of footage now that Russians themselves filmed with drones, right? Just dropping like explosives on like random people, like passersby, people on like bicycles with like shopping bags from there's just absolutely like
Yeah.
straight up broad daylight, human horrible war crimes, right? And people talk about like targeting of civilians endlessly when it comes to like, for example, Palestine, Israel, right? And
Yeah.
here it is, okay. The most blatant targeting of civilians you can ever imagine, and like nobody wants to even speak about it. I think a year after The Economist or Financial Times, one of them, the big journal,
Yeah.
posted anything about it. Like it has been like years since it has been happening at that point. And
I,
and yeah, I think that's also partially to blame, because people don't just know. Some people like still speak about it as some sort of like a, I don't know, like small civil war situation going on or something, or like, I don't know,
yeah.
local conflict, instead of like speaking about it as the biggest war like in Europe in a fuck ton of time, right? And nobody really, I don't know, I think like many people don't even understand the scale, actually,
Yeah.
of the actual like military action, even never mind the war crimes and everything. So
Uh,
um
one of the
yeah.
things that I hate so much, like you're so right. There's this trend where you see a lot of like leftist accounts on Twitter, and they'll go like, it'll be something to do with Israel Palestine. It'll be like there'll be something horrible that occurs in Gaza, etc. Like some like possible war crime and things like that, and then they'll go, imagine if Russia did this, the whole world would be up in arms. And
Yes.
it's like, dude, they do this every fucking day. Like I see
Yeah, I hate that.
I see
Yeah, I
Owen
hate
I
that.
see Owen Jones do this all the time, and Mehdi Hassan, and they're both smart enough to know better, and I think they're doing it on purpose just to troll. And like I was there like 2 months ago, Anastasiya, and I went to Dobropilia 2 days after they hit it with the Iskander ballistic missile, and then they did cluster munitions straight after. And I filmed walking around the apartment blocks that got hit. 14 people dead. That's the minimum probably, because you know I saw just dozens and dozens of apartments that were just completely incinerated. I filmed it. I posted online. Like, didn't get much traction, and like New York Times didn't cover it. I mean, New York Times did not talk about Dobropilia. None of these big newspapers in the West talked about Dobropilia, and like it just like it annoys me, because like I'll just post like some stupid like drama video or whatever on YouTube, and it'll get more videos. That it gets more views than like my thing where I went to Dobropilia and filmed evidence of war crimes and stuff. And it's like it just pisses me off that less people care about it. And like as you say, the Western media has really lost interest. Like Western media will only really ever cover war crimes in Ukraine when it's like a really when it's like something that's undeniable, like Sumi. But like something like Dobropilia, like that was 14 people killed in their beds, and like I don't think it got much coverage in the West. Like I remember like reading, I think DW, the German paper, did something on it, but no one really else talked about it. And like you see that all the time. There's war crimes every single day. You're so right about the human safari. I actually talked to Destiny earlier today, and I like Destiny and everything. He's cool. But yeah, he didn't know what the human safari was, and it's not his fault. Like, it's just like the media just doesn't talk about this really at all.
Yeah, I mean, he probably knows like a lot of things that I tell him, and that's about it, pretty much. But yeah, he also he doesn't really, to be honest, he doesn't really cover that much like Ukraine, Russia as well. He debates people when they pop up about the all the American talking points. He knows them, like
Yeah,
Burisma shit, all that. He spoke about that a lot. But actually, yeah, it's just not something that is on the news whatsoever. Like, and I bring this up, like his community actually helps me out quite a bit. It's most of my
yeah, they're
volunteer work
awesome.
is sponsored by them, not Steven himself, but DGG,
Yeah,
and they are super duper grateful to them because I managed to do insane stuff like in
yeah,
terms of like by the way, I used to be like just working in the shop selling stuff, like that's what I used to do before like the war. So I didn't have like any more than like $500 in my account, so I couldn't really obviously do what I'm doing now if it wasn't for them. But in terms of like, yeah, in terms of like coverage, it's just pretty bad. Like you can tell by the just by the things that, for example, even how it's covered sometimes, even if they do
yeah,
cover it, they cover it in a very like strange sort of like way, never naming the aggressor, like that is Russia, never naming the what was used. For example, I saw a lot of reports that never
yeah,
mentioned shrapnel pieces that was stuffed in the ballistics in recent strikes that they did in like Sumy, Kryvyi Rih, Kharkiv. We had like pieces of like cluster munition, like stuff, that pierces people like through essentially, right?
yeah,
And all the building in Kharkiv recently that was bombed was like shredded, like a cheese basically. So
yeah,
it's just deliberately being done to cause maximum damage to civilians, to people, right?
yeah,
And yeah, it's just yeah, I do blame like this reporting situation quite a bit because I think maybe people would care a little more if they knew. But it also kind of a kind of narrative, I'm sad to say, that doesn't sell, unfortunately, in the
yeah,
West as good as Israel Palestine, for example, is, because of the whole, well, not to be mean or anything, but oppressor oppressed doesn't work with Russia Ukraine for some reason in Western
yeah.
minds.
It's
I don't
true.
know.
You
Yeah, I
know
don't know
why?
why,
I think it's because
but
I think it's easier for people to understand a conflict if like the West is the terrible one in it. I honestly think that's like a big part of it, right? Like there's such a thirst, whether it's like on the left or on the right, there's such a thirst, it seems, in American society to be like, our society is fucking horrible, America's terrible. Like they want to feel like that about themselves for some reason. And so like when it comes to like, oh, America is trying to, like, if you go back a year and a half ago or whatever, like when America was like giving missiles to shoot down, the Russian missiles that were coming in to kill Ukrainian civilians, like that doesn't make them feel, it doesn't hit their emotional buttons for some reason. They want to feel horrible. They want to feel like we have the worst country in history, the worst society on earth. We should all whip ourselves. It's this thing, like, I don't know why far left and far right in America, they just love to whip themselves. It's very
yeah,
weird.
it's like this white knight guild. I don't know like what's
Yeah,
going on
that's it.
there, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
just also like this thing explained it in a while, like about the Iraq thing. Because I
yeah,
asked
yeah,
him basically, I was like, "Why the Brit of Iraq every 5 seconds?"
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then, yeah, the Iraq fatigue, I guess. So people like really, know more about the in the West, about the Middle East and all of that, and they know a lot more about like the involvement of the United States, like with Afghanistan, Iraq, all of that. And the knowledge about this part of the world is extremely non-existent. Like it's pretty
yeah,
abysmal in the West, and there's a lot of like whitewashing, unfortunately, of the communist socialist stuff, and also obviously Russia, Russian imperialism, Soviet Union, whatever it is, like you name it. Like most people, then you bring up, for example, Soviet Union attacking, like I don't know, like Finland, for example, like occupation of the Baltics, or the Poland, Poland being like attacked by Hitler and Stalin, Russia and Nazi Germany at the same time, Soviet Union, and all of that, and like Holodomor, most people don't even like
no one knows the Holodomor.
recognize.
Yeah,
Yeah. So there's like a lot of things, like mass repressions, mass executions of the Red Terror period in Ukraine, all of that, like
yeah,
prohibition of Ukrainian like language, culture, all of that, that goes back to essentially like 18th century and things like that. It's just 19th century, and it's just very much. I feel like it's both like lack of knowledge, but it also is this like obsession we talked about the American exceptionalism thing, like caring about only things that America is involved in. But they also somehow think at the same time that America is involved in this because they,
Yeah.
I don't know, Newland cookies or something like that they
Oh, the
sponsor
Newland
like
shit. Oh my god.
yeah. I didn't know. Again, I learned only
Yeah, you
by
wouldn't know
speaking
who
with Americans because
Newland would.
nobody cares. Yeah, literally nobody cares. I even listened to that conversation, that phone, infamous or
Yeah,
famous,
I
I
watched
guess,
it
phone
too.
call. And I was like, what's that about? Like, and she's like, well, there's like a revolution going on in this country, and someone will come to like power. So who are we betting on? Who do you think we should work with? Who will, who we will end up working with? And they're like, oh, this is a nuke, dude. That's it. That's the conversation,
Yeah.
literally.
Do they think that diplomats? What do they think the
Yeah, it's
diplomats
just
would be doing? You're a diplomat in a country during a revolution. Do you think that the diplomats would just be sitting there going like, let's play games or something? Like, I don't know. Like, what do they think they're doing? Like, they're just closing their eyes. Of course, every country that's going through a revolution, if you've got a diplomat in a country, they're going to be filing briefs back to the host country, going, oh, this is who might win. This is what we think of it. What do they think is going to happen? Like, you think Russia doesn't do that to other countries? It's just weird.
It's called politics. I mean, that's what politics is. It's
It literally
foreign
is politics.
policy, and they neatly forget that there was these people like Vladislav Surkov, who was planning all the theatrics in eastern Ukraine, and Sergei Glaziev, who was funding these pro-Russia demonstrations around 2014 in Odessa, in Kharkiv. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's proof of actual money being paid to organize this stuff from Russia. Yet people care about, okay, cookies. Is it cookies or was it sandwiches? We really don't know. But there was a coup from CIA and all this. So it's a ridiculous
get any.
conversation. Yeah.
I'm
But
still
anyway,
waiting, if I'm honest.
anyway,
For my
I
cookies.
think cookies is a good time to wrap up this discussion. Anastasiya, it would be lovely to hear how we can support Ukrainians at the front lines. Maybe you can tell us, and we can put links to the description of this video.
Yeah, you can link basically my Twitter, and that's where most of my like fundraisers, for example, if anyone wants to support it. I have like PayPal in my listed in my bio. I will actually do another fundraiser today, but it's ongoing like most of the time, because most of the time people need it. So all the receipts and everything is on my Twitter when I do fundraisers, and yeah, that would be cool if you could link it, and
Sure.
yeah. Could always use
For sure.
some help.
All right. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts, Drew?
No, I just wanted to say, it's so good to talk to you, Anastasia, and I hope we can have you on the podcast way more regularly, because we need to have people from Ukraine, talking. And yeah, like you are the people that we need to be listening to on this stuff. That's it.
I really appreciate it, by the way, because I do feel like nobody wants to hear from us, it seems. And it's really like quite lovely to have people like at least ask Ukrainians like so much talk about us, but like I said, never with us. So it's just pretty
Classic.
lovely of you to even do this, and shout out to crowd I guess as well.
Yeah, hopefully we'll
Although
have
he
crowd next
didn't
time.
show up. Yeah, but yeah, shout out to him for even talking with me about this whole thing. I did see the announcement you did like on Twitter and stuff about this, and I was like, oh, 3 like coolest dudes doing a
Oh, thank you.
thing.
That's very nice.
I want to be there. So that's kind of how it how I even saw it. But then I messaged him as well on like Discord about a shocked Pikachu face about this whole situation. And yeah, thank you very much for having me on. I would love
No, thank you so
come
much,
back.
Anastasia.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely.
For those who are still with us, subscribe, like, share, give a hug to your mom, and see you next time. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, guys.